What do a space opera, a singing drummer, and a teenage glam punk riot have in common? Turns out, 1976 was absolutely unhinged in the best way. This was the year bands took big risks, broke big rules, and somehow made some of the most iconic rock albums of all time. Ever wonder how a live album turned Peter Frampton into a heartthrob? Or how Boston recorded a masterpiece in a basement with homemade gear? We're diving into 13 albums that defined, redefined, and in some cases absolutely detonated the rules of rock. So plug in, turn it up, and ask yourself, how did we get this much greatness in 1 year? And did anyone ever check on the recording engineers? Let's get loud. Boston is what happens when a guitar nerd with an engineering degree locks himself in a basement and emerges with a rock album that accidentally defines an era. Tom Scholz, an MIT graduate and walking diagram of precision, built much of this record in his home studio using gear he designed himself. It's kind of like a science experiment gone very, very right. The result? A debut album so polished it made other rock records sound like they were mixed in a laundromat. More Than a Feeling might be the only song in history that both your mom and the local classic rock DJ will agree is perfect. It's a power ballad disguised as a rock anthem, or maybe the other way around. Either way, it's been stuck in our collective heads since 1976. What's wild is that Scholz had to trick the record label into letting him record at home. They wanted a flashy studio project. He gave them one. He just built the studio himself. Meanwhile, Brad Delp, delivered vocals so soaring that they should have been issued a flight permit. His range isn't just impressive, it's borderline interdimensional. There's a sort of mechanical tightness to the album, but not in a bad way. It's not cold or robotic. It's like a Swiss watch. Every piece purposeful, every second accounted for. The guitars layer like geological sediment, but cleaner and with more reverb. Boston's vocalist Brad Delp would say, "I was amazed that people were singing along with all of the songs. It really impressed upon me the power of radio. Wherever we went, they were just playing our record, and people just came." For all the technical wizardry behind it, the album never loses its heart, and that might be the most important thing. Taking something this precise and making it sound like joy. You blast Boston out of your windows and hope the neighbors are cool with feeling feelings at full volume. Here's the story. Peter Frampton, former guitar hero of Humble Pie and perennial almost there solo artist, puts out a live album because why not? And suddenly becomes the soundtrack to every sun-drenched afternoon in 1976. It wasn't planned, and it definitely wasn't expected. But Frampton Comes Alive did exactly that. It came alive, kicked down the door, and politely asked if you had 70 minutes to feel great. Most live albums are filler or ego trips. This one feels like a shared experience between artist and audience, like someone handed you a backstage pass that also included a free hug. Show Me the Way, Baby I Love Your Way, both sincere without being syrupy. They somehow avoid the pitfalls of cheesy romanticism, mostly because Frampton sounds like he actually means it. And then there's the ultimate Do You Feel Like We Do, which contains not only a crowd-pleasing talk box solo, but it's an entire vibe. Frampton made his guitar talk before Google even tried to. He uses it not as a gimmick, but like an old friend joining the conversation. It's charming in a way that's hard to fake and easy to overdo. yet he nails it every single time. The production isn't glossy or hyper-edited. It's warm, slightly loose, and all the better for it. You can practically feel the lights dimming and the crowd leaning in. Frampton doesn't just sing to the audience, he draws them in like co-conspirators. It's intimate without being small, and triumphant without chest pounding. Critics didn't know what to make of its success. Frampton just shrugged and kept smiling, guitar in hand, probably wondering the same thing as all of us. How a live album with no outrageous gimmicks became the most lovable juggernaut in rock history. There's no rulebook for lightning in a bottle, but Frampton comes alive. It came close to writing one. By 1976, Rush was on the ropes. Their previous album, Caress of Steel, flopped. Critics were circling like vultures, and the record label was begging them to stop writing songs about wizards. In response, Rush kicked down the door to the executive suite and handed in 2112, an album that opens with a 20-minute prog rock epic about a dystopian future where music is illegal. Subtlety, that was not invited to the party. The 7-part title suite is a full-blown sci-fi rock opera, complete with space priests, secret guitars, and enough narrative twists to fill a Philip K. Dick short story. Geddy Lee's voice wails like a battle cry from a far-off dimension. Neil Peart's lyrics read like a manifesto, and Alex Lifeson shreds guitar lines that feel like laser beams. It's wild, dramatic, and utterly sincere. Side 2 of the album is more grounded. Well, Rush grounded. It includes tracks like A Passage to Bangkok, a musical world tour with plenty of herbaceous undertones. And Tears, which lets Geddy briefly drop the high-octane yelping for something almost tender. It's a part of the album that proves they could write normal songs, if they ever wanted to. Neil Peart would go on to say, "I know the first album of ours that became successful was 2112, and it was an album that contained a great amount of frustration and anger, because the industry had really shat upon us, really." What sets 2112 apart is that it shouldn't have worked. It was defiantly uncool at the time, dense, nerdy, and unapologetically ambitious. But fans didn't just embrace it, they built shrines to it. Suddenly, being into Rush wasn't weird, it was a badge of honor. This album didn't save Rush's career. It let them start it on their own terms. From here on out, they were free to be exactly as complex, bizarre, and brilliant as they wanted to be. No compromises, no radio hits required. You can almost hear the door slam behind them as they walk into their own strange and wonderful universe. If albums had knuckles, this one would definitely be bruised. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap is AC/DC before the polish, leaner, meaner, and still figuring out how to turn mischief into merchandise. It's got all the grit of a barroom floor and the attitude of someone who just got kicked out for lighting fireworks indoors. The title track is a blueprint for petty revenge, sung by Bon Scott like he's offering a neighborhood service you didn't know you needed. Problem Child stomps along with pure teenage fury, and Ain't No Fun, Waiting Around to Be a Millionaire, is the slowest, sleaziest, get-rich manifesto ever committed to tape. There's a raw looseness to the performances that feels more like a dare than a recording. Angus Young's guitar solos sound like they're trying to break free from the amp, while Malcolm Young provides the foundation with the steadiness of a man who builds bar fights for a living. Bon Scott, of course, is in full rakish charm mode, Half danger, half smirk, all trouble. What makes this album fascinating is how well it holds together despite its rough edges. It's not polished, but it's never sloppy. It has swagger, but it never veers into parody. It's the sound of a band completely in their element, cracking dirty jokes while stealing your girlfriend and your amplifier. This album didn't get released in the US until 1981, long after Scott's death, which somehow added a ghostly edge to its eventual success. But by then, Black and Black had already blown the doors off the world. Dirty Deeds felt like the older, dirtier cousin who did it first. It's rock with a rap sheet and a perfectly straight face. By the time they released Hotel California, the Eagles had traded their denim and dust aesthetic for something darker, shinier, and more complex. This wasn't peaceful, easy anything. This was the sound of the American dream looking over its shoulder. Now, the guitars, they still chimed, but now they did it with one eye on the exit. The title track is pure mythology, part ghost story, part allegory, and fully iconic. It unfolds like a movie you've seen 100 times, but still watch to the end every single time. Don Felder and Joe Walsh trade guitar solos like twin serpents, and Don Henley's voice carries a weariness that feels earned. It's lush, ominous, and strangely cozy all at once. Elsewhere, the album is equally loaded. Life in the Fast Lane practically sweats excess with a riff sharp enough to cut leather. Wasted Time is Heartbreak in a Tuxedo. And The Last Resort closes the album with a sort of eco-conscious lament that was ahead of its time. Kind of like a soft rock warning flare. The band was at its peak creatively, but the pressure, it was immense. Perfectionism reigned, tempers flared, and drugs, they flowed freely. You can hear it in the precision. Every harmony is airbrushed, every arrangement deliberate. They weren't just making music. They were chasing something bigger, stranger, and a little scarier. The California they sing about, it's not real, and they know it. That's the whole point. This is the land of fantasy, burnout, reinvention, and gilded traps, set to music that you can still slow dance to. It's a record that smiles while quietly locking the door behind you. Before Destroyer, Kiss was mostly known for breathing fire, wearing enough makeup to terrify clowns, and making records that sounded like a demolition derby recorded in a broom closet. Then came Bob Ezrin, the producer who tamed Alice Cooper, and suddenly these guys were building epics. Sort of. Ezrin turned the chaos into a concept. He added strings, choirs, pianos, and structure. Kiss fans were stunned to hear something resembling restraint, while the band was reportedly stunned to hear what it sounded like to be yelled at during recording sessions. But the result was magic, or at least the fire and leather version of it. Detroit Rock City kicks things off with a car crash. Literally. And then launches into a gleaming, high-octane tribute to reckless youth. God of Thunder finds Gene Simmons growling from the depths of some rock and roll underworld, while shouted out loud as Kiss at their most inclusive, like a pep rally held by werewolves. Then there's Beth, the ballad that confused everyone. It's soft, sincere, and sung by the drummer. Somehow it became their biggest hit at the time, making it the only song in history that could bring your mother to tears and still end with a Gene Simmons blood solo 3 tracks later. Destroyer proved Kiss could be theatrical and meticulous. They didn't lose their grit, they learned how to sharpen it. The makeup stayed, but suddenly there was something underneath it. For a band that was built its brand on bombast, this was the first time the music left a bruise on purpose. If rock and roll had a reset button, the Ramones sat on it with ripped jeans and no apologies. Ramones is raw, fast, and loud in a way that slammed its door fast and loud. It's over before you know it, and you're still wondering, what just happened? At 29 minutes long with 14 tracks, it's basically a punk speedrun with guitars instead of power-ups. Opening with Blitzkrieg Bop. The band punches through your speakers like they're in a hurry to get back to loitering. The songs don't even care about solos, bridges, or polite introductions. You get a riff, a hook, and a song title shouted at once for clarity. Judy as a Punk lasts under 2 minutes, and it says everything it needs to, twice. The production is cleaner than it has any right to be, which only highlights how little the band needed fancy tricks to get their point across. It's drums, bass, guitar, and Joey's nasal, hypnotic vocals riding the chaos like a bored prophet. There are no ballads, there are barely verses, but there's attitude in every second. This album didn't just introduce punk to the masses, it kicked the door down and sprayed graffiti on the walls. The drummer, Tommy Ramone, would go on to say, it wasn't just the music in the Ramones, it was an idea. It was bringing back a whole feel. At the time, critics didn't quite know what to make of it. It was too dumb to be smart, too smart to be dumb, and too fun to ignore. Ramones isn't about mastery, it's about momentum. They didn't change music by showing off. They did it by stripping everything down and setting it on fire with 3 chords. They weren't here to impress you. They were here to wake you up. Kansas was the band that you never saw coming until they hit you with a violin solo and a lyric about Nietzsche. Left Overture is the album where all of their musical ambition finally clicked. Classical meets Southern rock meets prog wizardry. And somehow it works without collapsing under the weight of its own braininess. Carry On, Wayward Son leads the charge like a heroic battle cry for philosophy majors, complete with a cappella harmonies and riffs that mean business. It wasn't even meant to be a single. The band threw it in last minute, kind of like a forgotten snack that ended up feeding a generation. It opens the album with enough force to leave a mark. The rest of the record doesn't slow down much. The Wall and Miracles Out of Nowhere are sprawling, layered tracks full of tempo changes and existential anxiety. These aren't songs, they're campaigns. You could plot them on a map. Robbie Steinhardt's violin darts in and out like an operatic assassin, and Steve Walsh belts with the urgency of someone who's read a little too much Greek tragedy. The musicianship is tight, and the arrangements feel like they were carved out with blueprints. Somehow, the whole thing avoids pretension by being too sincere to mock. These guys weren't showing off. They were really just really into what they were doing. It's not an album you casually put on. Kerry Livgren would say, the fact that we were an American band who, in many ways, emulated the progressive rock from England was something that bugged a lot of American writers. But they thought, you shouldn't sound like that if you're from Kansas. Apparently, other people didn't care. We sold millions of albums anyway. There's beauty in the drama, and Kansas made sure you felt every note like a warning you can't ignore. The year is 1976. Peter Gabriel has just left Genesis in a puff of theatrical smoke, and everyone assumes the band is finished. Instead, they hand the mic to Phil Collins, yes, the drummer, and release A Trick of the Tail, a prog rock album so confident it basically winks at the doubters and carries on building its strange little universe. It's still Genesis, but now the storytelling feels lighter, more curious than cosmic. Dance on a Volcano opens the album with brisk urgency, all shifting rhythms and musical gymnastics. Collins, as it turns out, has a voice that fits perfectly. Not dramatic like Gabriel's, but warm and sly, like a narrator letting you in on a secret. Each track feels like a fable. Entangled floats by like a lullaby with a sinister undercurrent. Squonk tells the tale of a mythical beast with enough groove to keep it from getting too Tolkien-y. Madman Moon and the title track lean into rich piano work and surreal lyrics, pulling you deeper into Genesis's peculiar world without ever feeling like homework. Musically, the band is as tight as ever. Tony Banks' keyboards are lush and exploratory, while Steve Hackett's guitar lines add texture without demanding attention. The production is crystal clear, giving every note room to breathe. There is complexity here, but it never feels like a burden. More than anything, the album has balance between whimsy and precision, between past and future. It's not the end of Genesis's golden era, as many feared, but the start of something even more intriguing. Sometimes evolution doesn't roar. It hums a tune that you can't stop thinking about. Tom Petty's debut album didn't exactly explode on impact. It smoldered, circled the block a few times, and quietly installed itself into the bloodstream of rock radio for the next 4 decades. Released to little fanfare, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers played the long game, sneaking into our ears with jangly guitars, Florida charm, and a sneer that somehow felt polite. Breakdown is a masterclass in restraint. Just a few notes, a soft snarl, and enough space between the chords to let the tension sweat a little. It wasn't an immediate hit, but it crept up the charts like it was casing the joint. Then there's American Girl, which closes the album with such urgency it's hard to believe it was recorded by a bunch of guys still figuring out where they fit in the industry. Petty's voice wasn't like the arena rock howlers of the day. It was nasal, a little scratchy, but full of personality. He sounded like someone who had just gotten fed up enough to pick up a guitar, and the band backed him with the kind of tight looseness that makes great rock sound easy. What this album nailed, quietly and without much bravado, was mood. There's a coolness that isn't forced, a swagger that doesn't lean too hard. It sounds like a band that's already been on tour for years, even though they were barely out of the gate. Mike Campbell's guitar work in particular is all about serving the song without stealing the spotlight. Critics didn't know what to do with it. That's a running theme here. And American radio didn't either, until it caught fire in England, of all places. That overseas love boomeranged back to the States and turned Petty into the kind of underdog who wins simply by outlasting everyone else. It may have started slow, but this album planted roots in places that even the band didn't expect. If you're only vaguely aware of Thin Lizzy, chances are you know Jailbreak as the album with The Boys Are Back in Town. And sure, that's the anthem, equal parts strut, nostalgia, and bar brawl. But reduce Jailbreak to that one track and you're missing out on an album that smuggled poetry into hard rock and made twin guitars sound like a revolution. Phil Lynott wasn't just the frontman, he was the architect. Part street poet, part Irish mythmaker, he sang about cowboys, outlaws, and heartbreak and rebellion with a romantic edge that made even the tough guys get a little misty. The title track opens like a comic book breaking into real life, full of escape plans and righteous noise. The album swings between swagger and sincerity. Angel from the Coast has a jagged cinematic energy, while Cowboy Song builds like a western scored by Led Zeppelin. Then there's Emerald, which taps into Irish folklore with a galloping riff that practically slices through armor. Every song feels like it's telling you a story you've almost heard before, but not quite like this. Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham's dual guitars weave in and out like synchronized swordsmen. There's aggression, but it's not aimless, it's crafted. It's easy to forget how influential this sound would become in metal and hard rock, probably because Thin Lizzy never got the household name treatment they deserved. Lynott, charismatic and criminally underrated, had that rare ability to sound both larger than life and deeply personal. He wasn't just singing rock songs, he was casting spells in a leather jacket. If you listen closely, Jailbreak isn't about escape at all. It's about claiming your place, loudly, and on your own terms. Dreamboat Annie doesn't waste time with introductions. The first track, Magic Man, kicks in like a confident stride into a smoky bar. You don't know who this is, but you're about to care. With this debut, Heart landed like a thunderclap, fronted by the Wilson sisters who promptly redefined what it meant to rock without apology or permission. Ann Wilson's vocals? Ha! Operatic power with a bluesy growl, able to go from angelic to apocalyptic in one breath. And Nancy's guitar playing? A blend of acoustic delicacy and hard-edged riffing that gave the album its dual personality. Crazy on You is the perfect showcase, starting with a delicate acoustic intro before crashing into a full gallop like a horse startled by fireworks. This album lives in a dreamy, liminal space between folk, hard rock, and progressive flourishes. Soul of the Sea and the title track float by with watery mysticism, while White Lightning and Wine stomps around like it borrowed Led Zeppelin's boots and added some lipstick. It's gentle one minute and roaring the next, but it's never unbalanced. What's refreshing is how natural it all feels. The shifts in tone don't come off as genre hopping, but as a band expressing different sides of the same thought. There's a confidence here, even in the ballads, that feels fully realized, rare for a debut, and even rarer for one recorded in the 1970s Pacific Northwest without a giant label machine behind it. When it was finished, we looked back amazed at what we had done because there had been no real roadmap. It was a bunch of songs and a lot of gumption. It was nothing like anything that was being played on the radio. Heart wasn't trying to prove anything. They just showed up, made exactly the music they wanted to, and dared the world to keep up. The fact that they did it with this much grace and fire makes Dreamboat Annie all the more unforgettable. The opening riff of Cherry Bomb sounds like a door slamming open and someone yelling, "We're here, and we're not asking." With the Runaways, 5 teenage girls crashed into the rock scene with volume, eyeliner, and a middle finger aimed squarely at the industry that expected them to stay in the audience. They didn't just demand attention, they took it. Joan Jett brought the attitude, Lita Ford brought the firepower, and Sherry Curry sounded like she was sneering through lipstick. The songs were fast, dirty, and more interested in confrontation than subtlety. You Drive Me Wild and Is It Day or Night are soaked in defiance, swagger, and just enough chaos to make you wonder if the amps actually might catch on fire. Despite being molded by the very controversial Kim Fowley, the band quickly developed a voice of its own, loud, fearless, and clearly more interested in electric rebellion than polite songwriting. There's glam, there's punk, there's even a raw garage rock energy that doesn't care if your speakers actually survive the record. The performances have that barely contained energy of a band that's still learning in real time, but already knows what matters. They don't play like session pros. They play like people who have something to prove. That urgency gives the album its edge. The Runaways didn't invent Riot, but they definitely sound like they were born in one. Critics mostly wrote them off, but kids heard something different. Something that said you didn't have to wait to be invited to the stage. So there you have it, 13 albums from 1976 that didn't just rock the charts, they rewired the whole system. From guitar solos that could melt asphalt to punk records made in under 30 minutes. This was a year where everyone swung for the fences and somehow hit something even better. If you had a favorite or you violently disagree with my takes, drop it down below in the comments. We love a good music debate, especially if it involves capes, talk boxes, or twin guitar attacks. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives, wild stories, and lovingly sarcastic tributes to the albums that shaped music history. And hey, hit that like button like it just insulted your favorite band. Thanks so much for watching, and rock on.